Treasury. I hope there's no vision of the Treasury yet. They haven't quite worked out yet. There's a whole lot of money being diverted to the public sector. So I've got 2 more slides, I think that's right. The only thing there are some governance issues with this, and I've talked about they have to be on a public register. So there's some accountability, so you can watch what's going on, and if you think it's being misused, it's up to the public to do it. There has to be a declaration when the company will suggest the charity in some related field. So packaging, it's nearly always trees or woodland or whatever. But they have to have a declaration, they have no interest, including wives or relatives, because that's not in the law. I didn't think that one through. The agency said, you've got to do that. And also the agency now said, we, or the officers who've negotiated, must also have no interest in the charity, otherwise we're all helping each other. And indeed, the first year, these companies would just send the checks to the charity, and Friends of the Earth or whatever, and say, fantastic, thank you so much. And then the agency said, actually, you've got to tell them why you're sending them a check. It's because you've breached regulations. So that has gone in now. Quite interestingly, and that is there is no formal admission of guilt. This is the inducement. The agencies say, if we impose a penalty on you, you obviously have admitted guilt. Clearly they have admitted guilt, but the no formal admission of guilt is quite significant for insurance companies, so it's an incentive. So, I look to a time, I hope, when this is rolled out, and when I see, God, £1 million from packaging in 3 months, 4 months, fantastic, we could get millions of pounds. But what I want at the end of the day is the criminal law focused on the truly criminal, so we can use those resources and bring that to bear. And so that a company in future, if it knows it comes from the criminal law, it knows it really is serious, and this is no longer a technical offence. They've done that. But on the other hand, we are still forcing companies to pay up in some way, whether it's a post-sanction or a self-imposed sanction, for non-compliance. Otherwise, that's unfair. So we get the best of both systems. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard, for another splendid presentation. We have here 3 people with serious quantities of expertise in the subject area that are very well informed, and they've given, I think, some very useful insights to the question we had earlier. Why is it so difficult to enforce environmental law? But that isn't to say they haven't raised their own set of questions. We have a few minutes to take those questions. If anybody would like to ask, there's a hand up there in the middle. Where's Joe? Joe. Oh, was there a hand nearer to you?
No, it's fine. You can talk first. I think it's better for him.
Okay. But better than this one first. Yours was the first hand to be raised. Joe doesn't like running about a bit.
Hi, my name is Dario and I'm a postgraduate student at King's College London. I have a question for Ms. Suresh. You talked about gathering of information and gathering data for criminal prosecution in environmental fields. And I would like to know if you have like a preferential channel of, I don't know, databases, or do you think it could be useful to create a global database for environmental crimes to help prosecution at a global level?
In terms of how we gather information, in some countries we are more lucky than others. For example, in Mozambique, we would have never expected to be able to collect that level of information. We've tried similarly to collect information in Tanzania, Mozambique's neighbor, and it's just absolutely impossible to do something like that. So more information about the people behind corporate entities would be useful, not just for someone like us, like a charity investigating crime, but for enforcement authorities themselves. In terms of a global database, that is something that we're working on, working with international authorities like Interpol and the CITES Secretariat as well. We've been advocating for having a public database which has information not just on seizures, because that's what people usually talk about, seizures of tiger skins or ivory, but what happens after the seizure takes place, because that is the real enforcement. So in terms of arrests, were assets seized, were proceeds of crime seized, what were the penalties imposed. So we've been advocating something called indicators of enforcement. So these indicators can be used to assess whether an enforcement action was meaningful. So if enforcement action stopped at seizures and nothing happened thereafter, it's probably not as meaningful as say when seizure takes place, arrests are made and proceeds are seized. So that is something that we're hoping will be reality the next few years.
Next question. The gentleman behind you, Joe.
This question is really for, anybody who's spoken today can chip in. I spend the better part of the day hearing about how litigation is long, difficult, complex, and most of the time unfruitful. Are there any non-litigious ways one can get involved as a lawyer? Like, for example, if you're advising a corporation on a financial transaction and you're providing legal due diligence, can you focus on the environment, especially since a lot of business is being done with Chinese companies these days?
Those questions for me.
Well, yeah, I think there are lots, and one of the areas I was talking about, these enforcement undertakings. Well, I hope that lawyers will, if that's the way it looks, I would hope that a lawyer, if they are, they see they're going to be threatened, certainly with a civil sanction, that's the way it's going, or they've committed a breach and there's some consequences, they will actually think, how can we make an enforcement undertaking real and genuine? And this is not just the kind of wiping off, it's something we are owning up, that we've made a mistake, and we've got to get our system back. We don't want to commit an offence. So I think on that side, the companies that are, which I think there are many companies, and we heard that this morning, who don't go out to intentionally breach. They try to make cock-ups and they cut corners and they're undercapitalised, but they often don't do that. But we still have to have a proper sanction system for them. So there are ways of getting certainly involved in that and separating that out from the, presumably, I do know that, all the companies and the individuals, as you know, who actually do intentionally, some of the waste people, they also have lawyers advising them. So you can go down that route. But I think there are lots of ways for law to get involved without necessarily ending up in litigation, because it is, at the end of the day, it will have some effect, but it may not have all the effect you want.
In most international contracts, you'll have the non-criminality clause, which requires each party, each signatory, to ensure they're not committing any criminal offence. If they do, then it will vitiate the contract and perhaps make it void. So that's a very standard way, that a very blunt way, that both parties can ensure that the other is not committing any, at least, criminal offence.
Gentleman towards the back here.
I'm Harry. I'm one of the students that was sort of involved in the organizing of this great conference, I would say.
Yes. Well done.
I've been listening to the speeches and all the wonderful talks so far. I was just wondering whether we are in a time in history when we actually need to start asking bigger, more fundamental questions as to whether we need to look at the mode of production and distribution of wealth, whether it is capitalism itself that we are sort of coming against, rather than just, because I was just thinking as to how far we can go with regulation, looking at the fact that some of these corporations have already got their voice in parliament, in several places, in law and everywhere. How far can regulation go? Is it time for us to start thinking about distribution itself, capitalism itself?
Limits of regulation, anybody?
I should declare an interest as an old Labour card-carrying member, not New Labour, I should add. I'm very conscious that, of course, means of production, capitalist society, the more we want, the more we need, the more pollution there is, etc. But of course, yes, but also if you look at some of the so-called social states, some of the Marxist states, they create as much, if not more, pollution. So it's not a matter of politics, but I think you're right that it's more a matter of consumerism. And one simple thing, waste packaging. one of the most boring subjects in the world. That's why Howarth came to me. Having read the newspaper articles castigating me, they thought, there's the man to represent us on waste packaging. And they pleaded guilty. And of course, when they approached me, I said, even I don't understand the waste packaging regulations. But those that do will tell you that you just need about a 10% change in the volume of packaging around your McDonald's chips, or around the vacuum cleaner that you buy that comes in a lovely box in the polystyrene. You just need a small change in that consumer item to have a huge effect on how much landfill there is. So yes, you can have a big change.
I mean, what I would say from, we've been around a long time. When William and me got started on environmental law in the kind of mid-70s, it's what Tom Burke calls, we were largely dealing with what I call the old environmental agenda, which was dealing with things like waste pollution, water pollution, all those issues, where in a sense, anyone knew the legal solutions which would probably work, and they often weren't there or the enforcement wasn't right there. Politically, it was normally a win-win situation. There'd be some illegal companies in waste where it would get put up. But most of the industry wanted to go that way. They wanted to have the high standards. And I call that the kind of old agenda, which was, and also the science and the kind of cause and effect was reasonably certain. And we contributed on that. I think there is now, and it's really what there's a new agenda, which is about resources, it's about climate change, it's about equity, which is actually much more difficult, because you lot, well, no, not all of you lot, some of you are older than me, I think, but the younger ones, and Joe and people like that sort of age, are going to have to wrestle with that. And some of it, I don't know whether law has a real role in that, or regulation. It's exactly what you're doing. Is that the right way to dealing with it? It may not be the right way. And I think that's a real difference. And also, politically, and I think this is what, again, we're coming to, it is not necessarily a win-win situation for politicians, things like climate change or knowing resources and what of that. And that makes it very difficult. I'm not an elected politician. It's all right for me to say that. But if you're elected, you're accountable to an electorate, and you're saying things that might be good for their children or their children's children, but actually you need to change your lifestyle now. It's not easy to deal with that. So I do recognise that, and I'm afraid I'm going to sort of pass it on to the next generation to certainly think what the role of law is, which is those of you who are lawyers have to think of that and whether there's a limit to law.
Should we get any thoughts on the limits to law?
Just wanted to add that Sailesh had mentioned consumerism as well, and that touches on what you just asked, that the UN Convention on International Trade and Endangered Species is now entering a very new field of demand reduction, which is a huge field when it comes to illegal trade in wildlife. We're finding that because of the highly political nature of the issues involved, like illegal trade in ivory, it's not easy to address this issue in an effective way. So one of the biggest challenges we face is that the CITES parties have voted to create a legal, authorized ivory market in China and Japan. So on the one hand, we have CITES parties, including the European Union and the United States, who supported the ivory sales, talking about legal ivory. But on the other hand, you have the parties also talking about demand reduction and reducing demand for ivory, which is sending extremely mixed messages to this increasingly wealthy, growing middle class in China who is buying such products. So I think the political nature of the issue is also a huge problem in addressing consumerism effectively.
One last question. The lady was asking in the first place about enforcement. Same question again?
No. Actually, thank you for this very insightful presentation. And I wanted to say hello to Professor McCrory. I'm from UCL as well, and I was at UCL studying environmental law as well. So I've been kind of inspired by... I
haven't taught you yet.
No, I was taught by Professor Jane Holder. So I think I've been quite concerned about the fact that you mentioned the kind of the right to pollute, giving the offenders kind of the easy way out, because I know that that's one of the flexible solutions to the problem, but I mean money and giving money to charities or trying to solve the problem by giving money out to countries which are really affected, for example, by climate change is not really a solution for me, because money will not bring back the island that's going to be submerged in the Pacific or in the Indian Ocean, in Maldives, for example. So I think I'm quite concerned by this because it's more of a reactionary approach than trying to solve the solution from a more humane and a more direct way, because you're just telling, it's just a message that you're sending to the polluters. Okay, we're giving you the choice of polluting and you can actually pay a charity or you can plant trees. But I mean, I'm really concerned by this.
All right. That's probably more of a question these guys are going to be able to handle in the 2 minutes I've got up. But it's about more forward-looking approaches, less retrospective. 30 seconds each on that. I'm conscious there's some tea to be had out.
No, let's not have tea. We'll go out.
The principle that underlies most pollution prosecutions is the principle that polluter pays. And therefore that's a starting point. What I think Professor McRoy was talking about was a very different set of circumstances which aren't to do with blameworthiness, not to do with those that do it on purpose, and therefore not to do with those who should pay, but those who inadvertently cause the pollution.
I think that, I mean, that is right, and I hope that I said at the beginning, I still think and absolutely believe that there is a major role for criminal law. And I did recognise in introducing this non-criminal sanction, there is a danger, there's the politics, and I knew that there were people in biz, or the Department of Business, who saw this as a wonderful deregulatory thing, and they would say, oh, we'll have 80% of things will be done by this civil approach, no criminal law. And I said, no, I think probably it'll be about 25%. But that in itself is, to my mind, that's a good signal, because you're not actually, even with the undertaking, you're not letting the company off, because they have to do action. It's not just the money. They have to show what are they doing not to comply again. And secondly, as I said, that to the extent that there is money payable, because they can't restore, it's not the sort of thing with packaging where you can't restore an environment. It's certainly over the actual money saved. So there is a kind of fiscal punitive element. It's not worth your while waiting. So I think in those, but as I said, it's only, there isn't a single solution to this. I think that's the main thing, but anyway, we get down to that. So this isn't the kind of be-all and end-all, but it fits within what I see as an integrated system of sanctions. And that's what we're trying to create. And that, if you go to other countries, such as Germany, they use many more civil sanctions, but not enough criminal sanctions, because they haven't integrated the approaches. So I think we're at the start of a kind of journey, which will be... And the last thing I'd say, which really picks up your point, and the one thing I did recommend and didn't get into the legislation, which really upset me, was that I said that regulators have to produce figures of their, what we call their output. You know, how many prosecutions they take, how many were successful, how many undertakings, how many, so we can all judge. But of course that actually it's not what we're really concerned about. It's the outcomes. What were the improvements? Were there any improvements in the quality of the environment, or have we just shoved our eyes somewhere else, or whatever? And that's much more difficult outcome measures, and if you look at the EPA in the States, they can be manipulated very easily, and the EPA who produces outcome sometimes just gloss it over. So they're not easy. I think they have to, and I did put that on the list, and that got cut out. So there wasn't an obligation, but it seems to me that outcome measures of actually seeing what effect, because at the end of the day, actually, there's some ethical stuff, but I actually don't care whether it's a prosecution or it's a civil sanction or undertaking. What I want is to see less serious incidents in river pollution, or whatever area we're dealing with, or less illegal trade. And I don't actually care how we get there. But unless you've got quite good, robust figures to actually see those trends, we're just sort of playing around with all this. And that's what still concerns me.
Shruti, final few seconds.
Okay, just a quick comment. It's not exactly what kind of the examples that they spoke about, but in the CITES context, when ivory trade was authorized by the parties, it was done so that the money obtained from the auctions was used for conservation. And we've seen now that the whole thing has backfired tremendously. So I think this concept of sustainable use or generating money for saving species through trade, it could be a dangerous path. It's debatable. And this is my personal opinion, it's not EIA's opinion, but I'm yet to decide on whether this whole principle of sustainable development and sustainable use, whether that actually works in real life or whether it's the biggest scam pulled on the conservation.
Yeah. Thanks Thanks very much. My apologies, folks. We've run over time again. You can see why. It's been a splendid session. We've had some superb questions from the floor, and the speech has been brilliant. So let's have a final
Yeah, could someone... Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, that's actually what it does, apart from human rights.
Yes.